My name's Dave Berke, call sign Chip. I was a Marine Corps fighter pilot for 23 years, flying F-18s, F-16s, F-22s, and F-35s. And this is everything I'm authorized to tell you. I spent my entire life fantasizing and dreaming and working towards being a fighter pilot to fly off carriers. And the day I leave Top Gun, I blink my eyes and I'm in Ramadi, Iraq, leading ground Marines in the most violent city in the world is something I never, ever thought of, I never expected, and I never considered, and I never pursued. There is no comparison between launching and recovering, taking off and landing from an aircraft carrier than from a regular runway. It's almost impossible to even try to compare the two. Landing on a carrier, you're kind of like smashing into the flight deck at about 800 or 900 feet per minute. So it is what they call a controlled crash, but also you have a very small landing area. An aircraft carrier is about 1,100 feet long, but the runway is only about 300 feet long. More importantly, there are wires that a hook on your jet have to catch to slow you down. Those wires only take up about 100 feet, so you have to be really, really precise. Every carrier landing that you attempt, you expect to not land, meaning you prepare to miss. And it's not because you think you're going to miss, but the runway is so short that the second you touch down, you go to full throttle to take back off. Now, if you catch a wire, the wire will stop you. It doesn't matter how fast you're going or how much power you have in the jet. But if you don't, you'll be at the end of the runway in about a second. So you need to be getting back airborne right away. You're coming in at about 140 knots, maybe 170 miles an hour. You'll slow to a stop in maybe 2 seconds. So these things are violent. They're tons of fun, at least during the day, but they're nothing like regular airports. Carrier landings at night in bad weather are always the scariest experiences that most pilots have. We were in the Sea of Japan. It was probably 2 o'clock in the morning. I'm coming back to land and the ship had essentially steamed into a snowstorm. And I remember being up in the catapult, getting ready to launch, thinking, this is dumb. They're probably not going to launch. Boom, off I go. Like, oh, wow. And it was bad, but it also deteriorated while I was airborne. And so throughout the evening, we started seeing like the clouds coming down, things are getting worse. We all knew coming back, this was not gonna be a good night. I'm gonna conduct a landing where I'm not gonna be able to see the ship. We call it a 0-0 landing. I've only had 2 of these in my whole career. Any naval aviator hearing this knows what that means. It is gonna be terrifying. And I'm gonna have to rely on the ship's radar and eventually the LSOs to talk me into landing on the carrier because I'm not gonna be able to see it myself. I was panic stricken. Tons of fear. And so I'm up in what we call holding. I'm like probably 10 miles behind the ship, maybe 15 miles behind the ship. I'm up at about 6,000 or 7,000 feet. And I'm just circling, waiting for my turn to come down to land, knowing I'm gonna fly into essentially a storm. And I am totally freaking out. I'm having to go through this mental exercise of calm down, relax, shake out your hands, shake out your neck. That's the worst part of the landing because you're not doing anything. You're just waiting for your turn. In retrospect, I'll always scratch my head like, why did I even do this? But once you're airborne, there are no alternatives in carrier aviation. You got to get back aboard the ship. There's snow on the jet, there's snow on the aircraft carrier. The LSOs talk me into the wires and I land. People were congratulating me, telling me what an amazing job it was. They're watching it on camera and people are telling me I did an awesome job. And I felt so good. I felt like I had accomplished something. And I remember going back to my room that night after this unbelievable career-defining event. And I went to bed and I had this nagging feeling. I felt like I was a passenger in my own plane. It was an odd thing because looking back, I didn't really felt like I did anything. I followed some instructions, I did what other people told me to do, but if I was doing it by myself, it wouldn't have happened. And that changed my trajectory of my perspective and experience about being a carrier pilot. There's an old saying in aviation that said, it's better to be on the ground wishing you were in the air than in the air wishing you were on the ground. And I never understood what that meant, even though I'd heard it 100 times. And it was like, come on. That was the first time, like, now I know why people say that. Top Gun is just a fancy name for what is called the United States Navy Fighter Weapons School. I would absolutely be lying if I didn't tell you that the movie Top Gun completely changed the trajectory of my life. So the movie comes out in 1986. I'm 13, almost 14 years old when it comes out, and on the full screen of this movie, you are seeing the F-14 Tomcat, jets off carriers, dogfights, missiles. I owe a lot of my career to being captivated by that movie. The original also, and the sequel, Also didn't get everything right. When you get to Top Gun, there's always a little sense of competition between you and your counterparts. There's no trophy at Top Gun. They don't rank you. The goal of Top Gun is to train you as a student so you can go on to be an instructor of a high caliber to prepare other students and other pilots to go to war. The chance to go to Top Gun as a student is a pretty rare event. It's very coveted. It's what most of the pilots want. It just doesn't happen for most pilots. Every squadron sends on average 1 pilot per year. Squadron has somewhere between 17 to 20 pilots. I think we had 19 when I was there. Me and another pilot got brought into our commanding officer's office. We sat down and he just said, hey, you two are going to Top Gun. You're going to represent the squadron. He was a pretty demanding guy, really good believer in training his pilots. He was happy to send them to schools. Everybody in fighter aviation knows what Top Gun is. They also know, aside from the movie, what it truly represents is the pinnacle of your craft. Top Gun is located at Naval Air Station Fallon, Nevada. It's kind of in the middle of nowhere. It's not an ideal place to be stationed, but it's a really good place to fly and train an aircraft. You can fly supersonic, you could drop bombs, you could simulate a lot of threats. Fallon is in the middle of nowhere because it gives you the best opportunity to do the most training without really impacting a local population. Typical day at Top Gun is a long day. You spent hours the day before and hours the morning of planning, preparing, rehearsing, coordinating. You'll do training missions that last less than 30 minutes. You are burning gas in full afterburner, doing 1-against-1 dogfighting, and you are burning through gas like it's crazy. Come back, and you're gonna debrief sometimes 5 hours, sometimes even longer, but a very long debrief. Every flight, every evolution, there's instructors that are evaluating you. The only way to do that is to set a obscenely high bar of expectation and then demonstrate that you can actually identify all the errors, all the shortcomings, all the failures, no matter how small they are, and that takes time. If you take 4 or 6 people on a mission, you got to go through every single one of those pilots' mission, how they flew, their radar, their communication, their formation, their flow, and so you can see things start to really stack up. Everything about being a Top Gun is humbling. Everything. My first mission at Top Gun, the first flight was a dogfighting mission where I was flying against another instructor, just 1-against-1. I did such a bad job. When we landed, he's like, don't get out of your flight gear. We're just gonna go fly again. And we called it an immediate refly, which meant I was so out of the parameters that debriefing wasn't even gonna be a good use of the time. I was totally in over my head at the beginning. The instructors fly airplanes to such a degree of precision that my mistakes got magnified to a point where he's like, hey, we just need to do this again, just take it easy. And it was, a little embarrassing, but Top Gun is not a place where you're expecting to outperform anybody on the instructor side. You just want to learn and do a really good job and show that you're receptive and open-minded to it. You get humbled the day you walk in there, and you stay humbled from the time that you leave, without doubt. So the word mastery does not enter your mind at Top Gun as a student. You finish Top Gun, you graduate, you get your Top Gun patch. I climbed back into my same airplane, that was my jet, and I flew home and landed at Miramar, back to my squadron as the most recent Top Gun graduate in the Marine Corps. It was really cool. We had a tradition in our squadron that Top Gun graduates didn't wear their patch. Our squadron didn't want to differentiate that Top Gun graduates, so we didn't wear patches. And so I knew that I wasn't going to be wearing my Top Gun patch. So on this flight home, I'm like, I'm wearing it. I'm going to come back in, go back into the squadron with my Top Gun patch. I'm going to get my one day wearing that patch, and I got a lot of ribbing for it. But honestly, guys are pretty happy for me. It's a really cool qualification. It's a highlight of my career for sure. Saying your rank, your last name is pretty formal for aviation, so everybody gets a nickname. We call it a call sign. In the Marine Corps especially, there's a tradition that call signs are not very flattering. We're not going to try to call you something that's really cool. So most of the nicknames and call signs in the Marine Corps typically come from you doing something dumb, something embarrassing. I am no exception to that. It's in 1996. I'm flying the advanced jet trainer called the T-45. I am getting dressed to go for a flight, and I'm wearing something called a G-suit. And all a G-suit is kind of like a pair of pants that you plug in. It has a little hose on the end of it that connects to the jet to fill up in case you pull high Gs. It helps you stay awake. It's a really important piece of gear. The very end of the G-suit that plugs into the airplane is like a garden hose buckle. It's a big round metal buckle. I was having a conversation with someone as I'm getting dressed, and I'm moving my arms around, and as I'm moving my arms around, I hit my helmet off the table, and the helmet started to fall over the table, and I reached down to grab the helmet, and as I reached down, my hand hit the hose flew up and hit me in the face, and it knocked out my 2 front teeth. holding them in my hand. I can literally see a pool of blood and 2 chipped teeth. My instructor walks around the corner, looks at me and says, "You're not flying, you gotta go to medical." The student I was talking to, I was supposed to go flying with, looked at me in horror, and I got undressed with my flight gear and went to the doctor's office. If you've ever seen the movie Dumb and Dumber, and you've seen Jim Carrey's character with these 2 giant chips in his teeth, he had 1, I had 2. It could have been a lot worse, but they settled on chip, and it was because I had 2 big giant chips in my teeth. Again, it's not flattering. I'm not excited to tell that story, but that's how I got chipped, and it stuck. I remember vividly my very first combat mission. I put combat in quotes because it wasn't necessarily the most harrowing mission. It was actually before September 11th. It was a mission in 2000 that we called Operation Southern Watch. We were patrolling the southern portion of Iraq to make sure that they weren't flying in that area. And they had actually moved in a surface-to-air missile, an SA-3 missile system, into an area that we said you couldn't. We got assigned what we called a response option, which meant we were going to go out and take out this surface-to-air missile system. I had in my squadron the newest jets in the fleet, these highly capable, we call them Lot 18 F-18s with GPS, and this new, at the time, bomb called a JDAM, which is a Joint Direct Attack Munition, which is a GPS-guided bomb, something that was really new at the time. Hours before we launched on this mission, we knew it was going to happen. A lot of the preparation was, we called it mission planning, is knowing where the target is, making sure the information is correct into the jet, into the weapon. This is about a 2-hour flight from launching off the carrier, getting gas to make sure we have enough gas to get there, and flying deep into territory the entire time knowing what I'm going to be doing. Obviously, I was nervous. It was night. It was dark. I was definitely amped up. When you get close enough to drop the bomb, you're only maybe 5-10 miles away. It's really not that far. So you're really going a long way for a relatively short window to release this. Quite frankly, it's pretty straightforward. It's pretty mechanical. You get good feedback that all the systems are working correctly. There's a switch on the left side called the master arm switch. You turn that thing on, everything comes alive. You get this indication that everything is working correctly and is ready to go. You get a little cue that says to release. You hold down something called the pickle button, which is a red button on the control stick. And then in about a second later, a 2,000-pound bomb drops off your jet. It's a big drop. It's a big clunk. The jet makes a lot of noise. And then the bomb goes and does its thing. I had what's called an infrared pod, which is basically just kind of like a camera that watches this. And I held that thing on the target until the bomb hit it. It went exactly where it's supposed to go. Huge explosion on the camera on the pod. And then a 2-hour flight home. So it was probably a 4-hour mission for about 30 seconds of excitement. It was worth every second though. I came back, I was like a celebrity on the boat for a little while because dropping bombs was pretty uncommon. And for someone that junior in their career for the opportunity, at the time it was a huge deal. I remember being excited, I was honored, I felt lucky to be able to do it, but I was also just really pumped that I had the chance to do that. On my first deployment, before September 11th, our carrier probably dropped maybe total 10 or 15 bombs. Really relatively small amount of bombs. That's over a course of about 6 months. I won't lie, pilots on a carrier do kind of enjoy, status is the wrong word, but there's definitely a uniqueness to being a pilot. And it kind of cuts both ways. It's a bit of a double-edged sword. You got to be careful. It's really hard not to think you're the center of the universe when you're a fighter pilot. Our egos get out of control sometimes. Carriers are billion-dollar machines that are manned by thousands, 4,000 or 5,000 people on a carrier to make this carrier function, all with the sole purpose of launching and recovering aircraft to go to war. And on the boat, there's maybe only 150 pilots total on the entire carrier. And when you are the one in the cockpit doing that, sometimes your ego tells you like, this whole thing is about me. That's not even remotely true. I literally could not do anything on that carrier without anybody else's help. Forget taking off and landing. I couldn't even move the aircraft carrier without 10, 15, 20 other people supporting and helping me. You got to learn to keep that ego in check. Fighter pilots are often pretty type A. They're pretty strong-willed. They're pretty disciplined, meaning They're willing to do the work. Becoming a fighter pilot is not all just flying around doing dogfighting training missions at Top Gun. In fact, it's mostly just a lot of disciplined effort to study and learn, even the things that might not seem all that fun, you know, how the fuel system works and engine systems work. But to be good in a jet, you have to build some aggression. And I don't mean just like kind of wild, uncontrolled aggression. I mean the ability and willingness to put your jet into very extreme scenarios and extreme environments. That's the type of aggression I'm talking about. You can't be passive. You can't be slow. You can't be hesitant. You have to learn that aggression, when controlled, is probably one of your best assets. I am not a big risk taker in my private life, in my personal life. If I look back on things I did in an airplane, it is startling some of the things I chose to do and some of the dumb things I did in an airplane. I am not like that in my private life.
Can you tell me about one of the dumb things you did?
Let me just think for a second, because the ones I would think about, I definitely would not want on camera. I think there's no statute limit on some of the dumb things. What kind of people marry fighter pilots? I got to be careful with this answer because my wife may watch this. Not crazy people, but people that absolutely understand that there is a uniqueness to what we're doing. You know, I have an incredible wife. I met my wife when I was at Top Gun. When I was an instructor there. She got to see kind of the full range of combat and life experience. And it's very sad to say this, but at certain intervals, there are going to be accidents, mishaps, and fatalities. It's going to happen. I never really thought about that. I mean, I knew it was a possibility. I understood that objectively. I saw it happen. I've been to a lot of funerals. I don't, and didn't at the time, certainly never really understood the burden that a spouse would carry, knowing that your spouse is going to go do something that might produce that outcome. And I think that weight is much heavier for the spouses, for the people that marry fighter pilots, than for the pilots themselves. I flew 4 different airplanes. I started an aircraft called the F-18 Hornet. I first started flying the F-18 in 1998 all the way till 2002 when I went to Top Gun as an instructor and started flying the F-18 and the F-16. So I had dual qualification in both of those aircraft. As soon as I got up to Top Gun to be an instructor, I was in the very first class of Marine Top Gun instructors to fly the F-16 because it had just arrived up at Top Gun, and then transitioned to what we call the 5th generation fighters. I started flying the F-22 Raptor, flew that for almost 4 years, and completed my career flying the F-35B for 3 years. The exchange with the Air Force to fly the F-22, it just turned out that right at the time that I was available for that exchange, they were looking for a former Top Gun instructor with F-16 time to fly the F-22 Raptor. And then ultimately, my time flying the Raptor coincided with the Marine Corps buying the F-35B, and I was a natural fit to be the first operational pilot to fly that airplane as well. I can't promise you this, but I'm pretty sure no one else has flown those 4 jets. If they have, it's a very recent advent. But during my time in my career, I was definitely the luckiest guy. I was the only guy to fly those 4 jets. The reason I got to fly so many different aircraft, I have to admit, is a real combination of luck, timing, circumstance, and of course some preparation. So the F-18 is really the Marine Corps' primary backbone for conducting operations in the full spectrum of capability. On the Air Force side, the F-16 is pretty similar. The F-16, like the F-18, is a really capable multi-mission, multi-role aircraft that does kind of everything. When you start talking about 5th generation aircraft like the F-22, the origins of that jet really were just what we call air dominance. They wanted the Raptor to be this highly capable stealth fighter to control the skies. But that aircraft has also it's evolved into a multi-mission, multi-role capability aircraft that does a pretty wide range of things. The F-22, that's unlike anything else that's out there, is it has what we call thrust vectoring. So it's an incredibly powerful airplane, 35,000 pounds of thrust per engine, so you got 70,000 pounds of thrust, and you can do things like cartwheels and pedal turns and these unbelievable things. You just can't do that in a 4th gen airplane. We have something called a pedal turn where you're essentially spinning around like a top. You'll watch it do things that just seem to defy the laws of physics. It's nothing but it's just pure fun. It is just the most ridiculous thing. And then you lead into the F-35, the newest fighter in the world, by far the most capable when it comes to the range of missions. It's also a stealth aircraft, really hard to find. The F-35 pretty much does everything. The attributes you need to be successful in warfare, there is no airplane better than the F-35 that represent that. You need to know what's going on. where it's happening, when it's happening, who's doing it, who are they doing it to, in a sensor-fused, network-centric communication with all sorts of resources: space, cyberspace, surface, subsurface, land, sea, air, radio frequency, infrared, laser, electro-optical. They all conduct a whole wide range of missions, really to make themselves available to do whatever is necessary, really as warfare evolves. These aircraft are not cheap. You know, the F-18, started as probably a $30, $40 million jet. Now the modern versions of the Hornet, probably $70, $80 million. Same thing with the F-16. When the F-16 was designed in the 70s and the Air Force bought that in the late 70s, it was intended to be a low-cost, pretty simple single-seat fighter. That thing has evolved. Our newest block aircraft are pretty expensive jets. The F-22 and F-35 at its origin were well over $100 million each. To the American taxpayer who spent $100 million on this airplane, the first thing I wouldn't say is this thing's untouchable and unbeatable. I would say war is war, and war is deadly, and war can be dangerous. What I would tell you is that airplane is worth every penny. Because everything that has preceded that thing, every other fighter that we have, the threat, if they so choose, depending on where we operate, has the potential to make them irrelevant. I'm home from Top Gun maybe a month at the most when September 11th happened and our squadron went off to war. The expectation is right away you become one of the key tactical leaders to start training other pilots and prepare them. I had this routine. I'd get up, I'd exercise, and I'd get ready for the day, and I would lace up my boots and my flight gear, or my flight suit. I lace my boots up, and I'd turn on the TV in the morning. And it's probably 5, I'm in West Coast time, so maybe 5:30, something around that time. And I'm watching the news, and like, holy cow, what's going on here? I only lived a little ways from the base. It took me hours to get on the base. They're inspecting every vehicle. They got the dogs. I mean, clearly the world had been upended. By the time I get onto the base, it took me, like I said, a couple hours. I am briefing as the flight lead of 4 F-18s of the potential of launching with live missiles, because we had a whole bunch of aircraft, long-haul jets flying from like Asia Pacific, Japan, into San Diego, LA to the West Coast. The idea of civilian airliner being a threat, totally foreign to all of us. And a lot of that is very much a blur. 4 of us on a live missile mission, the potentially thinking about what airliners might be doing. Obviously, thank God it didn't happen, but the world turned upside down that day and everything changed after that. And I think in retrospect, there's a lot of expectation that we really didn't know exactly what to do or what we were doing, and we were doing our absolute best. And within a matter of days, our squadron embarked aboard an aircraft carrier parked off the West Coast. I went back to Afghanistan in October of 2001. My second deployment was much more robust, much busier. But ultimately, the carrier, even though you might not be flying a combat mission every day, the minute the carrier pulls off the pier and the aircraft come aboard, it's all business. One of the most memorable missions that stands out to me was a mission where I didn't even drop any bombs. I was on a mission with a relatively young guy in the squadron, and we were flying essentially over a town in Afghanistan. A ground team had gone in and found some folks to get them and get out of there, and they're essentially in a difficult situation on the ground. There's a lot of civilians involved. It was in a small city, and what they were looking for were some help from us. They didn't want us dropping bombs. They were looking for some support. And we were flying around at really low level. I'm talking hundreds of feet, doing a circular pattern, trying to find their location. And it was really tough to find them. And it was incumbent on us to find them and fly over the top of them as a kind of a show of force. 100% you're nervous. You're totally aware of it. It's a foreign environment. You're close to the ground. You're trying to pick things out. You're trying to find the other aircraft. Like, there's a lot going on down at low altitude. There's a huge difference between hundreds of feet and thousands of feet. I don't want to be flippant when I say this, but thousands of feet off the ground is very easy. It's very low risk relatively to what you're doing. When you start talking, 500 feet, sometimes lower, 300 feet, which is pretty uncommon, those are very, very risky missions. You have to be uniquely qualified to do that. The margin for error is very small, and the time to hit the ground is seconds. So you got to be on your game when you start talking hundreds of feet, not the same for thousands. That one is the most close and personal, I think the most risky to the people on the ground, and our contribution wasn't dropping bombs. It was doing a show of force over the top of them. That one surprisingly stuck out, and I think it was because of how difficult the situation they were in. Top Gun is a kind of a 3-year billet. I was a Top Gun instructor from August 2002 until August of 2005. Getting selected to be a Top Gun instructor is kind of like, the ultimate full circle moment. Like a fantasy, basically. You still don't ever think it's going to happen. You got there through performance. You've earned the opportunity to be there, and there's some part of you thinking like, hey, you must be pretty good at this, right? When I got there as an instructor in the beginning, some of my very, very earliest flights are with the commanding officer of Top Gun, really senior guys, and they're just out there doing things in an airplane that even at that stage, I'm like, I didn't know you could do this. I'm just at the very bottom of this mountain. The bottom of the bell curve of Top Gun instructors are better than almost any other pilot in the world. Being good in the airplane is not enough. You have to be able to teach. Every instructor there has what's called a subject matter expertise area, but across the board, we all teach all the phases of flight. I taught about surface-to-air missiles and counter tactics, how to defeat SAMs and getting shot at from the ground. We're teaching 1 against 1, 2 against 2, 2 against many, 4, 8. So we're teaching all the different phases of instruction, air-to-air, air-to-ground, reactions, things like that. So the instructor's job isn't really just his subject area. It's teaching the skill of flying and teaching. I showed up to Top Gun as an instructor with a lot of experience in the F-18. I thought that was the only fighter I was ever going to fly. The day I show up to Top Gun, they start receiving brand new F-16s as training aircraft to replicate threat. The F-16 was there essentially to pretend to be a bad guy aircraft, and right away they started sending guys to get qualified and trained on the F-16. I didn't even have to volunteer for it. It just happened. In a lot of ways, it's similar to the F-18, but it's much more powerful. It pulls more Gs. It's a faster jet. The training officer job at Top Gun is kind of like, it's like the job. When I was told by the commander of Top Gun that I was going to be the training officer, meaning I was going to be the senior instructor and I was going to run Top Gun as the senior instructor as a Marine, which is a pretty rare opportunity. Oh my God, I am going to run Top Gun as the training officer. That's a really coveted position. It's a lot of fun. It's very humbling. My CO at the time was a legendary instructor that had this incredible reputation. I knew I was going to work directly for him. I went through, I think, 13 classes, and I was a training officer, I think, for the last 3, so probably about 9 months of being a training officer.
How often did you hear the theme song from Top Gun when you were an instructor at Top Gun?
You do not play the theme of Top Gun as an instructor at the real Top Gun. Anything that references the movie at the actual Top Gun, the Navy's Fighter Weapons School, it's a $5 fine. So we're not playing the music, we're not quoting the lines at the real Top Gun. I left Top Gun. I had this nagging sense that I wanted to do something uniquely Marine Corps. I was going to leave the cockpit and I was going to now lead Marines on the ground in a totally different role. So I volunteered to be a FAC. A forward air controller is just someone who's qualified and certified and specially trained to communicate with aircraft, helicopters and jets, to call in airstrikes, to drop bombs, and to use the aircraft in close proximity to ground troops. The Marine Corps trains pilots to be forward air controllers, and I had a pretty good sense of those things because I had done combat from the air in an F-18. The Marine Corps believes, rightly or wrongly, for better or for worse, that pilots have unique perspective on how to use aircraft, which I totally subscribe to and I understand that. The Marine Corps is the only service that does this. The other services have what's called a JTAC, a Joint Terminal Attack Controller, which is essentially the same qualification, but it's not a pilot. It's a pilot FAC school, which is called TACP school, Terminal Air Control Party School, the school that teaches people how to use airplanes to drop bombs. It wasn't that hard for me because probably 90% of what they were teaching I knew because I'd done it from the sky. So I was learning a little bit different perspectives, but ultimately a pilot going through that school, it's just not that hard. It's pretty straightforward. I was going to go to Japan for a year and stand up a new unit that was being built. It's going to be a year. I go right back to San Diego, back to the F-18. That's not how it worked out. Within days of getting there, mid-September, there were other units of the same type. They called them Anglico units, Air Naval Gunfire Liaison Company. It just meant a team of forward air controllers and joint terminal attack controllers that were supporting combat operations in Iraq. And they were shorthanded. When they asked for volunteers, I was a highly qualified F-18 pilot, qualified forward air controller. I had to volunteer for that. So I put my hand up and said, I will go. And they selected me as one of the pilots to go be a FAC for this other unit. I deployed to Iraq from February of 2006 to September of 2006. The commanding officer of my unit essentially brought in a piece of paper to me as the senior FAC with all the different locations we're going to send little teams to. And he goes, you need to get this filled out. We have 25 teams or something like that. And there's 25 locations. Fill this thing out by the end of the day. I had this sense of knowing that I should. I volunteered myself to go to Ramadi. I was going to replace my best friend that was there. And Ramadi, in all the cities in Iraq, was the most violent city. It was the epicenter of all the fighting. I could have put my name on anywhere on that list. I did it because I thought I should. I did it because I was a well-trained pilot. The Marine Corps invested a lot in me. I understood how these machines worked. I also knew that if there was one place that was the most violent and the most deadly place, it just doesn't make sense to ask someone else to take that risk. It doesn't make sense to do that. Plus, my best friend was there, and I just, in good conscience, I could not imagine asking someone else to do it and not asking myself. And listen, I was volunteering me and my entire team. It wasn't just me. I had a 13-person team I was responsible for. So I think 8 of them were on their very first deployment. We had heavy weapons, we had Humvees, and the most important thing we had was the ability to control aircraft and use those resources. So we had F-18s, Harriers, Cobras and Hueys that were the Marine Corps aviation were all right there, just on the outskirts of Ramadi. I could also control Air Force aircraft. I controlled A-10s, I controlled F-15s, F-16s. One of the drawbacks to that is you've made this massive investment in time and money to teach them to fly airplanes. That is a huge expense that the military absorbs. And there's some question of like, why would you want to put that person in the middle of ground combat? Well, the Marine Corps' belief is they're the best person for it. And one of the things that I remember learning at the very beginning of my career at the basic school when I was trying to become a pilot is they say, hey, look around. These are the people that you're going to go to war with. And one day, these who are your closest friends and your counterparts, your buddies, are people you're going to rely on for each other. And they kind of paint this picture that's kind of ethereal. It's hard to imagine, but it sounds really cool and it resonates. And you think, oh, that would be kind of neat. We're going towards this position. And as we're moving we're moving south into like a 2-story building, and as my team is going to enter the building, we get lit up by machine gun fire. It goes directly over the top of our heads. It probably missed me and a couple guys by a foot. I mean, we are so lucky to not get hit. It goes right over the top of us. I'm like, oh my God. By the time we run into the building, and my job as a FAC was always to get up to the roof as best we could, because that's where I could see the airplanes, I could use my radio. That was a good vantage point to be. Up on the roof, as we're getting up to the roof, we start taking what's called RPG fire, rocket propelled grenades, that's hitting the wall outside of this roof. And I'm like, man, this is crazy. It was a crazy situation. And I'm with my Army patrol leader. The guy in charge was an Army lieutenant, and I'm there supporting him. And you can kind of see out in front of us, so we're taking fire from a position. It's really like a vehicle, and they had kind of staged themselves between 2 buildings, kind of cut us off, and they're hitting us. And I had an aircraft overhead that was supporting us. I hadn't checked in with them. I didn't know who they were, but I knew aircraft were assigned to us. There's these very specific procedures. You check in using the exact phraseology, the right terms. It's all sequenced. It's like almost like a list, and it's almost like robotic how you check in. Well, this guy didn't check in using any of those procedures. He said, Chip, this is Boo, what do you need? This guy, Boo, I'd been in the squadron with him in VMFA 314 before. I had deployed with him. This is one of my closest friends. This is somebody I had been in flying with hundreds of times. He was a Top Gun graduate as well. This is an unbelievably amazing guy that I knew personally. And so we didn't have to follow the procedures. And I looked over to the lieutenant and I go, we're gonna be fine. When you tell an aircraft to follow the checklist to drop bombs or shoot the gun, you follow what's called a 9-line, which is 9 lines in order that you're supposed to go through to make sure the communication is perfect, that all the risk has been mitigated. I needed Boo in his F-18, and I go, hey Boo, south to north, call wings level. We got multiple, we call them type 1 gun runs, like close enough that you can see they're right there in front of you. And Boo strafed this vehicle, they hit it burned to the ground. It was awesome. He ran down to like the absolute minimum fuel that he could get. He kind of barely made it home on fumes. And it was like this unbelievable culminating event of like, oh, this is why the Marine Corps does this. This is why they train pilots to be facts. This is why relationships matter. This is why you got to take care of your teammates and your counterparts, because at one point you're going to find yourself in combat and someone's going to save your life. And if it was a stranger, it would have taken a lot more time to figure out what's going on. Ramadi was the hardest 7 months of my life. Ground combat is different, and the intimacy, the closeness of it is really hard to capture. The missions I did in an airplane, there's an arm's length to that, a separation from that. There's a comfort of the confines of a cockpit. It's a place you're very comfortable. I asked myself repeatedly during those 7 months in Ramadi, what am I doing here? Why did I volunteer for this? How did I get myself into this mess? I certainly never thought that I was going to be facing like near-death experiences. One of the missions they would do is called movement to contact, which is exactly how it sounds. We would move in a patrol, and the patrol was about 20 Army soldiers and 3 or 4 of us from my Anglico team, and we'd move until we made contact with the enemy. Our job and our goal was to draw the enemy out so we could fight them. So the enemy had set up on the perimeter of our patrol 2 heavy machine gun positions, and they kind of baited us into this through some mortar fire. And I had been mortared a lot in Iraq. It's a very common thing. They shoot these high lob, very inaccurate, essentially little miniature bombs that get launched out of a little tube, and they detonate. They kind of get your attention. And when the mortars were going off, they were originally pretty far away, and they got pretty close. And I was like, man, this is closer than normal. We get lit up by 2 heavy machine gun positions on our perimeter, pointed right at, and I am in the absolute dead center of this ambush. And the bullets are coming in from my left and right. I kind of lean in one direction, and I'm forced to kind of lay down on my stomach. I call it the prone position. I have to essentially lay down. And the reason I have to lay down is the bullets are essentially going over the top of our heads. I'm there with 2 other guys from my team. One of them is my radio operator, who's with me all the time. He's probably 10 feet away. And he and I are essentially laying on the ground, staring at each other with eyes as big as saucers. You're trying to run through scenarios of what you should do. How should I handle this? How should I react to this? What you want to do is you want to get up and run to a safer place. And about 30 feet in front of me was like essentially a drainage ditch, like a little canal. And a lot of guys had positioned themselves, and then they were safe, and they were kind of gesturing over, come over here, yelling. But I knew that if I'd gotten up and stood up, I would have gotten hit. It was so bad that if I had reached out my arm would have gotten hit, because the dirt between me and my radio operator was getting hit by these bullets and kicking up and kind of hitting me in the face. You can feel the heat and the movement and the sensation of the bullets. And I could see and feel the trajectory shifting towards me, which was an awful feeling. And as these micro thoughts, I probably had 20 thoughts in milliseconds, and everything was, you can't do that, you're gonna get hit, you can't get up, you can't crawl, you can't move, you can't roll, you have to just stay right there. It's the only place you can be. Is I accepted that I was gonna get killed, and I knew it. I had gotten married a couple months earlier. The last words out of her mouth were, "Don't be brave." And that was her way of telling me, don't do anything stupid. Just please come back. You got to come back. It was about 2 o'clock in the morning back home in San Diego. And I had this image of like someone knocking on her door, waking her up at 2 o'clock in the morning, telling her that I was dead. And as the bullets got within maybe an arm's length, they shifted up and over. And, I kind of describe it like almost like the hand of God. And you can picture someone on the gun, on the heavy machine gun, kind of leaning back a little bit and kind of tilting up and over. And the bullets go over the top of my head and start impacting the dirt to my right and shifting off a little bit to the right, just by a matter of feet. And that gave me a very small window for me and Mo, my radio operator, to run to that ditch. I'd never been that close to that outcome before. And it was a reminder of what war is, what combat is, and what I was doing, and some recognition that I probably should have been better prepared. I was really good at an airplane. I was really good in that portion of my leadership life as a Marine. Ground combat was different for me. I was working really hard just to keep up. I finished Ramadi in September of 2006. Undeniably, the worst thing that ever happened to me was losing a Marine in combat. And my radio operator, a young Marine named Chris Leon, June 20th, 2006, was killed in Ramadi. And you don't think about losing a Marine in combat when you're at Top Gun. I come home to San Diego, and I come home to, the best weather in the world. I come home back to the amazing beaches. I come back home to an F-18 squadron. I come back home to my wife, my favorite person in the whole wide world that I just got married to and hadn't seen for almost a year. And I come back home to my life in San Diego. But I don't bring home Chris with me. That was hard, the heavy realization that I didn't bring home all my Marines. I fly into San Diego International and I get picked up by my mom and my wife, my two favorite people. You know, my mom Whitney comes in to meet me. My mom kind of like is outside at the curb, you know, waiting for me. So I have this amazing reunion with my wife. We walk out to the car and like, it's kind of a blink. Before I know it, I'm in my car driving home. You know, it's probably a 15-minute drive from San Diego International to my house in Pacific Beach. And my wife's sitting next to me and my mom's in the back seat. I kind of lose track of what's going on. And I'm realizing like I'm looking in like the gutters and stuff for IEDs. And I'm kind of having this very odd moment of like, I'm looking around and scanning like I'd been doing in a Humvee for 7 months, looking for potential threats, looking at people. I'm in the side streets of my community and I'm looking for things that stand out as a problem. And the din of my wife and my mom talking to me is an annoyance, is a frustration. And I scream at them, I tell them to shut up. And I said, stop talking, which was kind of my way of like, you shouldn't be talking, you should be scanning for threats, which is how I operated with my Marines. And it was a very startling thing for all of us. Certainly it startled for them because I'm screaming at them. And I kind of startled myself out of whatever mindset that I was in. Super embarrassing, super insecure for having done that. And I don't even know why it happened. I just lost my place in the world. First night I'm home, I'm with my wife. And remember, we got married in May and I left in September, but we really hadn't ever really lived together, you know, like that. The future is ours to how are we going to become a couple and grow as a family. And I woke up the first night at home with what became like a recurring nightmare. I'm on a patrol and I can see it very vividly. And I don't know the environment around it. It's just kind of a weird thing, but if I'm on the ground, there's a grenade rolling around. By the way, this never happened to me. This is a totally made up scenario. It's not a real thing. And I'm kind of using my rifle, the barrel of my rifle, I'm trying to knock it away almost like a hockey stick, and the grenade goes off and blows up and I wake up. I mean, I'm not reliving an experience, but I'm having this crazy nightmare that becomes like a daily thing. And it got to a place, got pretty corrosive because every time I go to bed, I knew this was gonna happen. It was a really rough start to my life post-combat in Ramadi with my new wife, who would wake up and see me just, you know, cold sweat. I had learned in my career to talk. When you're a flight lead, you talk all the time. You're telling everybody what to do. I was the one with the challenges and the problems, and like things had to be my way. I had this very rigid, narrow sense of trying to deal with my frustration, and what I didn't want is a bunch of people around me talking to me, which is not a good way to have a relationship. My wife kind of knew she had to defer to me. I was the one with the challenges and the problems, and like I got to a place probably 3 or 4, maybe 5 months after getting home, was like, hey, this is not gonna work. This is not, you can't have a relationship like this. This is not a marriage, but also isn't healthy for me. And I know how ironic and how simple it sounds, but I was able to solve my own problem by just changing that approach, which is I shouldn't talk, I should listen. Other people should talk. Who am I to be how come I get to be the primary talker in all these things? As if somehow I should control the environment. These nightmares are a reflection of something that was bothering me. A frustration, an anxiety, a fear, a memory, something that was bad. And what I was doing was ignoring it. Something must have happened to me that sets you off, that's triggering this. And it's in my head somewhere, and what I need to do is find it and just listen to it. And I am aware of how simple this solution sounds to other people. Just listen. But what I literally did, I literally just started listening to my own thoughts, my own brain, my own feelings. And shockingly, it helped. I won't say that I'm completely over it, but the glide path went from getting worse to getting better to a place where I am so much better now. And the interval's gotten wider and wider, but things will trigger, and I'll kind of revert back to that a little bit. It's very rare now, but it's not zero. You've got the playbook, you know what to do here, it's okay. I think veterans come home and they don't want to reveal those flaws and shortcomings, and I think embarrassment and shame are two of the bigger ones that I struggled with, and you just want to sequester those, you want to hide them. And I think that makes them even worse. There's a lot of embarrassment that you feel and some shame that you feel when you When I yelled at them to stop talking, or if I get startled by a loud noise, or if I watch something and I start crying, what you feel more than anything is you feel embarrassed. When you're the training officer at Top Gun, you don't get embarrassed very often. You feel like you really know what's going on and you have a lot of control over your life. I never sought professional help. I'm not judging people that do it. I want those resources. The Marine Corps and the military, they should provide those. I love that they do that. For me, it wasn't easy, but it was very simple. When I came back, I started flying F-18s. Very quickly, I got the opportunity to transition to 5th gen airplanes, and I started flying the F-22 Raptor. And the F-22 is what made me realize the world and warfare was changing. I loved flying the F-22. The most fun you could ever have in an airplane is that jet. I very quickly ended up as the very first operational commander and the very first operational pilot to fly the F-35B. The F-35B is what exposed me to the reality that the world, aviation, warfare, and the future were changing. And many of the things that I was doing were going to become irrelevant very quickly. Now, I don't mean the ethos of fighting and using aircraft as part of a tool for future warfare, but certainly the tactics, techniques, and procedures, the world was going to change. And the F-35 is what told me that, because it gave me the insight for the first time is that the commodity that guarantees dominance on the battlefield is information and awareness. Not how many bombs you carry, not how much fuel you have, not how fast you can go, and not how many G's you pull. And so even today, in the modern era, if I look back at what I knew at Top Gun, it doesn't work today. The lessons that I learned, how to teach, how to fly, how to train, all that is exactly the same and extremely relevant. But the world of how airplanes support warfare is totally different, and it's changing dramatically before our eyes. The future of warfare and how aviation is central to that is so different from where I grew up in fighter aviation. And the future of 5th and 6th generation fighters, think about just the world with AI and information and all that. That's the world we're operating in. This is a very dramatically different world than it was in the one I grew up in. We've already moved in this direction, major shifts, brand new wingmen that are just learning to fly these airplanes are gonna have massively more responsibility than we had. When I first learned to fly the F-18, they told me to join up and shut up. That meant just fly formation, be next to the airplane, don't say anything, don't lose sight of your lead, do what he does. Now we are flying in formations that are fluid, and you might have 10, 15 airplanes out there and you can't control who's where and what. So your most junior person has to have the skills of a seasoned flight lead. So the burden of responsibility has shifted. It's much more heavier for a younger, less experienced pilot than it ever was, which means they have to be a masters of their systems, their capabilities, their equipment, and understanding what's going on. The mentality, the mindset, and the skill set that's required for that and how we train to that is very, very different than how I grew up. I retired from the Marine Corps in 2017. I was about 3 months away from promoting to colonel, and I'd been selected to go back to command and fly the F-35 again. So on paper, it looked like an unbelievable life experience, another opportunity flying modern fighters for the Marine Corps. And there's a little nagging voice inside me that was saying, like, this kind of seems stale. It seems a little familiar and a little routine. And you can imagine throughout my career, everything I did was different. And this is the first time I had a sense of kind of recycling some things. To be a really good fighter pilot, when you stand at the ladder of the jet to climb up, you want to be excited and you want to be passionate and you want to be invested in that. And there's a little part of me that I had lost some of that, a little bit. And even a little bit to me was enough to say there's no way I can imagine for the next 3 years. And if I took the promotion to colonel, I was going to owe 3 more years of doing something that felt more like a chore than a passion, which for someone who spent his entire life fantasizing about flying fighters, even 1 degree of that was not okay. The day I submitted for all those things, I get a call from my old friend. His name was Leif Babin, as a forward air controller with my team. A group of SEALs came from SEAL Team 3. They were called Task Unit Bruiser. The leader of Task Unit Bruiser is a man named Jocko Willink. I essentially worked with Jocko and his SEALs in my entire deployment. Embedded is probably a strong word, but it's kind of how it worked. Is every major operation Leif and his platoon of SEALs from Jocko's task unit went on, I was with them. I had done countless of operations with him in Iraq. I held him in the highest of regard. He and Jocko had wrote a book called Extreme Ownership. That book had led them to have a leadership consultancy of teaching the lessons from their experiences that I was with them to companies and businesses, and it was starting to take off and grow. Leif said, hey, handshake deal, I can't promise you anything. I don't know where this is gonna go, but there's a chance this company might take off. We'd love to have you be part of it again. I'm at Echelon Front. I've been with them since it was just the two of them. We're now probably the world's premier leadership consulting company. We are all over the world taking the lessons that they captured in the book Extreme Ownership. They wrote a follow-on book called Dichotomy of Leadership, and they were kind of to let me write the third book in that series of Extreme Ownership called The Need to Lead, which took my lessons from aviation, from Iraq, and some other personal stuff. And I'm out there teaching leadership to companies to help their leaders get better, which is the coolest thing ever.
Hi, I'm a producer on Authorized Account. If you like this episode, then you should check out our new podcast and comment below with the names of people you'd love to hear us interview.